And good afternoon. You're listening to Ken Hudnall. This is the Ken Hudnall Show. Coming to you from our studios right here in exciting El Paso, Texas. Gateway to the Old West and the most haunted city in the country. Well, today is October 21st, 294th day of the year. 71 days remain to the year's over with, and we get to start a new year. Holidays observances, it's National Apple Day. Gobble down an apple. Make a delicious apple dessert or some other kind of savory dish. National Pumpkin Cheesecake Day. And a National Day of the Nacho, a crunchy, cheesy snack. Perfect for sharing with friends and family. Trafalgar Day. Commemorating a historic maritime clash and the valorous individuals who shaped the course of a nation's destiny. National Reptile Awareness Day. Share your enthusiasm for reptiles by pampering your pet. Visit a zoo. I tell you, I had quite a shock here in my home. I sitting at the table and glanced down and saw a 6-foot snake looking at me. That took some doing to get him to go elsewhere. Back to the Future Day commemorates that day that Marty McFly's time travel antics brought us hoverboards in futuristic fashion. Pro-Life Day of Silent Solidarity. National Check Your Meds Day. Everybody Writes Day. Count Your Buttons Day. Celebration of the Mind Day. National Honey Day. Global Iodine Deficiency Disorders Prevention Day. National Pets for Veterans Day. National Pharmacy Technician Day. National Witch Hazel Day. National Share the Warmth Day. Diwali celebrations. National Chemistry Week. ACE Week. The seed gathering season. Free Speech Week. YWCA Week Without Violence. National Parenting Week. National Health Education Week. National Retirement Security Week. Phuket Vegetarian Festival. It's a lively and spiritual event that transforms the area into a vibrant hub of culture and excitement. Well, Truffle Days in Croatia. National Temperature Check Week. Oktoberfest in Blumenau. National Adoption Week. Digital Parenting Week. International Infection Prevention Week. Respiratory Care Week. National Friends of Libraries Week. National Massage Therapy Awareness Week. National Teen Driver Safety Week. Nuclear Science Week. National School Bus Safety Week. And Map Reading Week. Famous people born on this date: Carrie Fisher, Kim Kardashian, Kane Brown, Doja Cat, and of course, Amber Rose. Let's see what stories we got in the news. There's always something going on. Well, the Ninth Circuit Court has ruled on President Trump's National Guard deployment in Portland. The Ninth Circuit ruled he can deploy Oregon National Guard troops into the city of Portland. That's a major victory for the Trump administration as it continues its efforts to send federal forces into Democratic-led cities, despite a string of recent setbacks in other districts and appeal courts. Judges on the 3-member panel ruled 2-1 to authorize the deployment. Judge Ryan Nelson and Bridget Bade, both appointed by Trump, sided with the administration in the majority ruling. The lone Clinton-appointed judge, Susan Graber, dissented. Maybe we can put a stop to this lawlessness. Well, the feds have targeted Comey's defense team, and bombshell filing cut up in the case. In fact, the DOJ is seeking to remove Comey's defense lawyer, citing a conflict of interest. The lead defense attorney in James Comey's criminal case is under fire. DOJ cited his possible role in the disclosures Comey made in 2017 shortly after President Trump fired him as FBI director in his first term. Prosecutors cited the years-long relationship between Comey and the defense attorney overseeing his case, Patrick Fitzgerald, as possible conflict of interest, noting in particular whether Fitzgerald might have had any role in the disclosures Comey made during Trump's first term. With a question of conflict of interest, they may well get him thrown off the case. Well, Karen Leavitt has gone scorched earth on a Huffington Post reporter, saying, stop texting BS questions. Tensions escalated between Leavitt and Huffington Post journalist S.V. Date, as the White House press secretary called the correspondent a left-wing hack on Monday, following his article poking at her snarky response to a new inquiry. She took to X to address the wild article. Well, tragedy was averted at Atlanta airport. Police arrested a man with an AR-15, allegedly threatening to shoot the place up. A Georgia man was arrested Monday morning at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport after threatening to open fire at one of the nation's busiest travel hubs. 49-year-old Billy Joe Cagle faces charges including terroristic threats, possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony, criminal attempt to commit aggravated assault, and possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. Cartersville police said that Cagle's family alerted him after seeing him live stream on social media. He said he was heading to the airport to shoot it up. Well, social media erupted over a deranged teacher who mocked Charlie Kirk's death in the No Kings viral video. Video of a woman users on social media say shows a school teacher in Chicago mocking the death of Charlie Kirk at a protest that went viral over the weekend. A lot of folks calling for the woman to lose her job. She can be seen on the video standing in front of a line of anti-Trump protesters on the day of the No Kings protest, yelling at a truck driving by that was carrying a flag honoring Kirk. She's seen on video pointing an imaginary gun at her neck and yelling, "Bang, bang." That video has racked up tens of millions of views on social media, widely interpreted to be mocking the death of Kirk. Well, an illegal immigrant allegedly caused a fatal semi-truck crash on the highway, killing the driver. He was arrested after he allegedly caused a fatal semi-truck crash. The Portage Police Department said Broko Stankovic was driving on U.S. Highway 20 in Indiana on Wednesday. When traffic came to a stop due to a Ram Sprinter turning onto Douglas Drive, but the suspect didn't appear to slow down in his semi-truck, according to Fox 32. Officials said Stankovic tried to make a hard, evasive left turn when he entered opposite traffic and hit a Subaru Crosstrek. Semi-truck jackknifed as a result and hit the Ram Sprinter, which was pushed under a road sign. Police said the 54-year-old driver of the Subaru died at the scene. Turns out Stankovic possessed a suspended Illinois commercial driver's license, which was a family member's, but didn't have a valid commercial driver's license himself. And his company wouldn't register with the Department of Transportation. So it looks like he's got a bit of a problem to deal with there. But the New York Post editorial board has called for Curtis Sliwa to quit the mayoral race to stop Zoran Mandami. According to the article, it's time for Sliwa to face reality and admit the city's best hope to avoid a disaster of a Zoran Mandami mayoral that just him to drive out the race. Well, it's his fault. He's right that it's not his fault that New York's been pushed into this corner. Simple fact is, Republican nominees far back in third place in every poll with zero chance of winning. Polls show Andrew Cuomo is actually within spitting distance of Mandami if Sliwa quits the race. But if he stays in and Andrew Cuomo loses by a small amount, he's going to be blamed for it. Well, government shutdown is stalls as the Democrats demand Obamacare subsidy extension. Now, government shutdowns in general can be boring until the shutdown impacts you, whether that's a missed paycheck or a missed flight delays. You can't visit some place you want to go. Questions about food and drug safety. But until you get to that tipping point, most Americans are ho-hum about government shutdowns and interpret the infighting between Democrats and Republicans as kind of par for the course on Capitol Hill. Democrats engineered a scheme in advance of this fall's government shutdown that transmogrified the shutdown into something Americans care about: health care. Remember, Schumer wanted all the undocumented immigrants to be given health care on the government dime. GOP said no. Democrats know that health care consistently polls well with voters. And Democrats have known for months that a lot of folks who receive their health care coverage through Obamacare exchanges would absorb the marked price spike with their premiums early next year. And notices informing people about the impending price increase would start to hit mailboxes mid-October. So they pleaded with the Republicans to subsidize Obamacare to defray looming price increases. Obamacare subsidies and the government shutdown aren't directly connected, but Democrats believe they could link the two. They're too busy partying to really pay attention to what the American people want. Well, Jane Goodall's cause of death has been revealed weeks after the primatologist dies at the age of 91. The weeks after her death, reports have emerged she died of a cardiopulmonary arrest or cardiac arrest, according to TMZ, and they cited their source as being her death certificate. That certificate was issued by the County of Los Angeles Department of Public Health. Also stated that she had epilepsy, although it's not clear whether that was a factor in her death or not. Well, Matthew McConaughey clarifies a long-standing rumor his accent cost him millions in Hollywood. He set the record straight about waiting to get the lead role of Jack Dawson in the 1997 blockbuster movie Titanic. During an appearance on Hello Sunshine's The Bright Side podcast, the 55-year-old actor was asked about claims that he turned down an offer to play Jack in the Oscar-winning movie because he refused to change his southern accent. He said, "That's the rumor. Never any discussion about an accent or anything." McConaughey explained the reason he didn't end up playing Jack was very simple. He didn't get the job. Well, in the Louvre robbery, that crew may have been hired by a collector, according to prosecutors. The thieves who brazenly robbed the Louvre Museum in Paris and stole priceless jewelry in one of the most daring museum heists in recent memory may have been hired by a private collector. Authorities are still trying to identify the burglars. Prosecutors said on Monday that a bottle of liquid and other equipment was left behind at the scene and now being examined. All leads in the investigation remain open. Apparently, Napoleon's crown jewels were stolen. Well, Bongino has detailed the FBI's zero-film mission after a hunting stand was found near Trump's Air Force One exit area. Apparently, it was set up as a sniper's nest. At least that's the rumor. The Secret Service is very concerned. The agency discovered that hunting stand during a security sweep. FBI Director Kash Patel ordered an immediate response once he was informed about that situation. Well, major U.S. steelmaker, Cleveland Cliffs CEO, says the company has an obligation to explore domestic production at Michigan, Minnesota sites. He's looking to help kickstart domestic production of rare earth minerals amid China's move to block access and amid its trade dispute with the Trump administration. Cleveland Cliffs, a steelmaker headquartered in Ohio, announced the rare earth plan on the company's quarterly earnings call on Monday. That would make quite a major change. Well, the Mandami's been blasted for a photo with the imam linked to the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. And Denise Richards, ex-Aaron Pfeiffer's, is charged with multiple felonies days after his courtroom arrest. He's been charged with 4 felonies, according to documents obtained by Fox News. He was charged with 2 felony counts of injuring a spouse and 2 felony counts of dissuading a witness by force or threat. He posted a $200,000 bail on Friday. He was handcuffed inside the courtroom, and he was seen arguing with sheriffs while going down an escalator at the courthouse as they took him into custody. Well, Denise Richards had quite a up and down married life. Well, President Trump has threatened Hamas if the Gaza ceasefire collapses as J.D. Vance goes to visit Israel. He warned Hamas, saying the U.S. brokered Gaza truce has to hold and issue another warning to the terrorist group. He says, we're going to eradicate them if we have to. They'll be eradicated, and they know that. And he stressed the deal had broad backing. 59 other countries have agreed to the deal, while insisting the ceasefire remain in place, warning any further violence will be met with decisive action. Well, Bernie Sanders says Democrats need to make a fundamental decision about what they stand for, if they can figure it out. He's the independent senator from Vermont. He was on The View on Monday. He said the Democratic Party needed to make a fundamental decision about what they're going to stand for. Co-host Aisha Farah Griffin pressed Sanders on the party's historically low approval rating and how his fighting oligarchy tour might help. Yes, he's touring the country with campaign funds. Bernie said that Democrats used to stand for the working class. That's not the case anymore. We need the Democratic Party once again to say to the billionaire friends, thank you, and their corporate sponsors, thank you, and we're going to stand with the working class of this country. He said the majority of the country is living paycheck to paycheck. People can't afford health care. They can't afford child care. Housing costs are off the chart. Can't afford decent quality food for your kids, which is extremely frustrating. Well, the Supreme Court's going to consider a case on the Second Amendment rights of drug users. They're going to consider a case that would allow people to regularly smoke marijuana to legally own guns. Trump administration has asked the High Court to look at a case involving a Texas man who was charged with a felony because allegedly had a gun in his home and acknowledged being a regular user of marijuana. Well, a treasure hunter's persistence has paid off. He found rare Spanish coins on Nantucket Beach. A mysterious 18th century coin recently resurfaced on a beach in Nantucket. Hobbyist Travis Nichols found the coin, a 1782 silver Spanish run real, at a beach on the south shore of the island, according to October 9th report by the Nantucket Enquirer and Mirror. Nichols is known in the local community, the publication said, of helping others find jewelry and other metal objects they had lost on Nantucket beaches. But his sights have always been on historic coinage. He's found over 300 historic coins that are in his private collection. Well, AI has helped predator poachers expose elementary school music teacher accused of sexting a teen. Watchdog group on Long Island, New York, used AI to bust an elementary school music teacher allegedly sent sexually explicit messages to somebody he believed was a 13-year-old girl online. Mark Verity, 37, of Islip, was arrested and charged with attempted dissemination of indecent material to a minor in the first degree, attempting to use a child less than 17 years old of age in a sexual performance, sexually motivated, and attempted use of a child less than 17 in a sexual performance. His arrest came after predator poachers Long Island confronted him outside the school while he works. The group said a team member was messaged by somebody identifying himself as Verity and sent a photo of himself on social media. The so-called teenage girl he thought he was sexting was a 29-year-old group member. Well, Hillary Clinton leading a brigade of left-wing mockery. She's bewildered over the Trump's viral No Kings protest video. She was among the Democrats and Trump administration critics who took to social media this week in a slam at a satirical AI video President Trump posted showing him dropping brown sludge on No Kings protesters. She said he's definitely not mad that 7 million Americans came out to protest him yesterday. I doubt it was 7 million. The millions of protesters took to the streets of cities nationwide Saturday as part of a massive No Kings protest denouncing him and his administration. He lampooned the protest in an AI-generated video Saturday showing him flying a military jet while wearing a crown before dumping brown sludge or sewage directly onto the protesters. Well, a newborn is found with the umbilical cord still attached in Penn Station. Police are hunting for the parents. She's found abandoned and alive. Baby's in stable condition, remains at Bellevue Hospital. Investigation's ongoing as officers look for video footage showing who might have left the baby. She was discovered about 9:30 in the morning and on stairway leading to the southbound number 1, 2, and 3 trains at the 34th Street Penn Station stop. Officials were alerted after an anonymous caller reported seeing the baby left unattended on the steps at the West 34th Street and 7th Avenue station. Well, they finally found the source of the UFO panic. The mystery drones. The private aerial contractors take responsibility for the swarms of mystery drones that wreaked havoc over New Jersey skies last year. Speaking at the Army's UAS and Launched Effects Summit at Fort Rucker, Alabama in August, the company allegedly revealed during a panel that their manned aerial craft were to blame for the scare across New Jersey skies. Well, scientists have revealed that kiwi and mineral water are potential cures to solve your bathroom problems. Alabama pilot and his 2 daughters are killed in a plane crash in Montana. The Powell County Sheriff's Office was alerted of a possible downed aircraft Friday afternoon. That's according to a Facebook post. Downed aircraft is located in a remote wooded area in Youngs Creek in the Bob Marshall Wilderness, northeast of Seeley Lake. Pilot and 2 other occupants were pronounced dead at the scene. Monte Santo Baptist Church, located in Huntsville, Alabama, said on Facebook that Mark Laney and Ellie Anderson were missing prior to their discovery. He's an experienced pilot, and they were hoping he made a safe landing in a remote area. Apparently, he did not. Well, Kerry Russell refuses plastic surgery. That's a trend sweeping Hollywood as she stays neutral. 49 years old, hadn't given in to the plastic surgery trend taking over Hollywood. She's staying all natural and makes her feel unique in an interview with People magazine. Well, New York City billionaires called on Curtis Sweela to drop out of the mayoral campaign. He's afraid he's going to tip the scales in favor of Mandami. Now, here's a story that just makes you want to scream. A teen from Charlotte, North Carolina, been arrested 111 times in the last 2 years. Still walking free in that soft on crime blue city. Basically, the attitude is boys will be boys. A lot of these were crimes of violence. Auto thefts. He's 15 years old. Larcenies from cars and possession of stolen property. Been linked to about 50 separate cases involving 55 stolen vehicles and 45 break-ins. But there's a revolving door. He goes in, he goes back out. And Trump and the Australian Prime Minister have signed an $8.5 billion critical minerals deal to counter the China dominance. The assistant fire chief's dog has escaped unharmed after he chewed on a lithium-ion battery that sparked a house fire. But luckily, the dog escaped unharmed. That was the Chapel Hill Fire Department. They released the video Monday. Assistant Fire Chief David Sasser's dog, Colton, was the cause of the incident. That was Chapel Hill, North Carolina, don't you know? All right, and finally, country music hitmaker Brett James has died. He made a final radio transmission before the fatal plane crash. According to a news report released by the National Transportation Safety Board and obtained by People magazine, he left the John C. Thune Airport in Nashville, headed for Macon County Airport in Franklin, North Carolina. There were 3 passengers on board: James, his wife Melody Carroll, 59, their daughter Mary Wilson, 28. No survivors. According to a report, he approached the MCA to land, reported he was at 6,800 feet and intended to perform a 360-degree turn to land on the runway. Well, he was approaching at 3,300 feet, and the plane began to sway and eventually went down. Well, Charlemagne the God says Democrats are losing the shutdown messaging battle. He said during an interview on Monday, Democrats are absolutely losing the messaging battle. Government's been shut down over 3 weeks. Well, on that note, I think we have finished all the news that's worth reporting. And we've been talking about stories of the paranormal. And of course, there have been a lot of mysterious happenings. We're going to talk about other mysteries. For example, what happened to the Hindenburg? Nowadays, if you're going to think about the word Zeppelin, it probably more likely would be associated with the classic rock act Led Zeppelin than it is to the actual aircraft. But in the late 1930s, Zeppelin aircraft were all the rage. Prior to the advent of commercial airlines, it was hoped that these air-filled behemoths would provide a means of public transportation through the skies. And for a period of time, it did seem that Germany had sufficient advanced designs of those aircraft for it actually to be commercially viable. In fact, the Germans were advertising their aeronautical prowess to the world to convince the other nations they were on the cutting edge of air travel. But all that changed May 6, 1937, when a massive German airship known as the Hindenburg went down in flames. It's making its way to a naval air station in New Jersey when the incident occurred. Now, this was a couple of years before the breakout of World War II. The arrival of this giant helium-filled behemoth was documented by veteran radio broadcaster Herbert Morrison, and he very calmly and professionally gave a minute-by-minute report of what he was watching. And he said the ropes had been dropped and they'd been taken hold of by a number of men on the field. Back motors of the ship are holding it just enough to keep it. But then his calm shattered, shifted to all-out panic after a spark ignited the entire blimp. Listeners at home heard him start to scream, "It's burst into flames." And he continued to describe what he saw, and as the whole flaming inferno fell down like molten lava, it was Morrison who would be remembered most. He shouted over and over, "Oh, the humanity, the humanity." Well, prior to all this, the Germans had been touting the Hindenburg as being one of the best and safest airships ever built. Already made several trips back and forth across the Atlantic without having any problems, and was hoped, not just by the Germans, but by everybody else, that German air power would lead the way to an exciting new era of luxury air travel. So the question becomes at this point, what happened? Why did the Hindenburg go down in flames? And frankly, to this day, nobody really knows for sure. The fact that World War II began a couple of years later, 1939, and all the horrors of the war ensued, this one particular startling incident was easily drowned out by all the noise and eventually forgotten. But even so, the destruction of the Hindenburg still presents itself as a mystery. To this day, nobody really knows for sure what happened. In retrospect, it probably seems almost expected that a blimp full of flammable gas might catch fire. At the time, though, one of the major claims being made by the Germans was this aircraft was one of the safest anybody could possibly set foot on. Extreme precautions had been taken to make sure no mishaps or accidents occurred during the flight. In fact, one of the officers posted on the airship, Ernst Lehmann, went on the record to state, "Don't worry, my friends, Zeppelins never have accidents." Another officer, Chief Steward Howard Kubis, was quick to add, "We Germans don't fool with hydrogen." And to ensure that nobody else did, part of the regular and tight routine of the Hindenburg flights to confiscate all lighters and matches and any other possible source of flammable ignition from all the passengers and the crew. And the catwalks contained special rubber linings in order to prevent any possible sparks from igniting in the odd chance they might occur. And the crew also wore special non-flammable suits just in case. They also avoided storm clouds, lest some electrical discharge hit the ship. And lightning, of course, presented a danger, no matter how remote the chance was. In fact, the Hindenburg was delayed in its initial landing that day because of the sight of some storm clouds that were nearby. Zeppelin was kept at a safe distance so the storm clouds passed by. Seemed like the coast was clear and the Zeppelin was given the green light to proceed. Right then, the Zeppelin made its approach that it suddenly ignited. Went down in horrific flames. Despite that horrific sight, a lot of folks survived the wreckage. It said that 97 people escaped death. 20 crew and 15 passengers actually died. And the question immediately became, what happened? Several decades later, author Michael Mooney tried to answer that question by suggesting maybe a crew member, specifically one named Eric Spill, might just have sabotaged the craft. He was involved with a woman who was known to be sympathetic for the Nazi Party in Germany. And although the Nazis later crushed dissent almost completely in their iron grip, in 1937, some dissenters could still be heard. Not only that, they were also known for to stage acts of disobedience and even sabotage. The famed Reichstag fires particularly backfired on the opposition, helped usher Hitler's rise to power. It was terrorist acts and sabotage used against the regime that the regime would use to justify its increasing totalitarian hold on German society. But considering as much, such things did add another tinge of mystery to the Hindenburg because the Nazi regime itself seemed hesitant to consider their craft down by sabotage. And even while the FBI was actively pursuing the angle in its own investigation of the craft that had gone down in flames over New Jersey, the Nazis were mostly quiet on the matter. The only top Nazi to make a comment was Reich Minister Hermann Göring, shrugged it off as an act of God. So the question becomes, was it just a random fluke? Or was the Hindenburg sabotaged? Was this an early act of dissent against the Nazi regime? Well, since nobody really knows what actually happened, one explanation is as good as another. But the bottom line is, something took place. Well, let's talk about the story of a young Kentuckian who was turned to stone. Now, the state of Kentucky isn't known for a whole lot of things. I mean, you got the Kentucky Derby, of course, and who could forget those buckets of Kentucky Fried Chicken? But other than those famous facts, most folks, when they think about Kentucky, consider it to be a rural backwater, but anything too noteworthy to speak about. It's got a rich folklore of its own. Anybody familiar with the region might have heard about the mysterious legend of the so-called petrified girl. This tale takes place in the sleepy little town of Easel in Morgan County, Kentucky. The town boasts a population just under 1,000 people. That's not really saying much, since the biggest town in the county, West Liberty, Kentucky, barely holds 4,000 people. Morgan County is just one big stretch of rural Kentuckian terrain. Most common sites in this area are hills, fields, and cemeteries. Oh, there's plenty of cemeteries. So much so you might easily conclude that down in Morgan County the dead outnumber the living. According to legend, it was sometime after the year 1900 a group of caretakers at one of the cemeteries discovered something highly unusual. They'd been tasked with transporting the buried remains of the deceased from one location to another. And that job led to the excavation of a 17-year-old girl by the name of Minnie Wheeler. Well, just as they were trying to lift and move Minnie's grave, they were shocked to find the coffin was extraordinarily heavy. They couldn't figure out why it was that heavy. It should have been light, considering it held the body of a small 17-year-old girl. So they wondered why they encountered this notable heaviness. They decided it was time to open up the coffin and find out. So they put the coffin down and opened the lid. And they were shocked by what they found. This deceased young woman appeared to be frozen in time. Perfect, pristine condition, hadn't deteriorated at all. In fact, seemed to have turned to stone. Not only had the corpse turned to stone, but it said the clothing that the corpse was buried in was stone as well. Finding was so unusual that said it was reburied very quickly so that it wouldn't be stolen and maybe turned into a sideshow activity. Such things might sound a little bit ridiculous to us today, but this was the era of P.T. Barnum and circus sideshows with their height. Also, supposedly for that same reason that the new location where Minnie was reburied was kept quiet. Apparently, we can rest assured that the petrified corpse was reburied in one of the old cemeteries in Morgan County, Kentucky. We just don't know which one. Well, the easiest explanation for this legend is maybe it is just a legend. Maybe it's made up. As easy as it would be to believe such a thing, the fact that later researchers will stumble upon what seemed to be verified proof of Minnie and her burial would seem to be refute that explanation of this interesting dilemma. There's an account from the Hazel Green Herald, a local newspaper was in circulation at the time. It verified both the existence of Minnie as well as her burial. The listing dated back to October 7th, 1885. And it said Miss Nanny Wheeler, daughter of J.W. Wheeler of Grassy, died of flux. That's unnatural discharge, don't you know? On last Thursday and was buried in Easel on Friday. She was 17. Well, researchers have since matched this Nanny Wheeler with the supposed relatives of Minnie Wheeler and concluded they're probably one and the same person. Minnie's been deduced to be either a nickname or an erroneous rendering of Nanny. But however it may pertain to the case, it seems the most interesting discovery was the reason behind the coffins being relocated to another cemetery. It seems that water had been flooding under the grave sites at the initial burial ground. There had been a fear of contamination of the water. It seems that several local residents had fallen ill in the ensuing months, and there was a fear maybe the corpses of the deceased mixing with the water were somehow behind the contamination. Or as it was reported in the Hazel Green Herald, an edition printed on February 17, 1888, that the people of Easel, feeling the location of the graveyard had much to do with the epidemic of sickness, on Wednesday commenced to remove those who were buried there to more suitable places. We understand that 50 graves will be required to accommodate the coffins being removed. Timing also lines up with the story, since it was supposed that a few years after Minnie was buried that her grave was dug up and her petrified remains were discovered. According to the timeline from the paper, she was buried in 1885, dug up in that mass excavation which took place in 1888. As for why the girl's body had to turn to stone, it turns out the explanation may be related to the very cause of the excavation. It seems that the water that ran underneath the graves was extremely hard water. Anybody who's ever dealt with hard water might know it tends to cover anything it touches with hard, stony sediment. Those who've had to deal with hard water coming out of their home faucets know what it's like to have hard sediment cake their sinks and destroy coffee pots and fog up their glass containers with a thick film of sediment. And imagine what that stuff would do to a dead body being perpetually washed in hard water for 3 years. Enough to turn anybody into a stony sediment-caked statue. It's believed that the hard water sediments flowed over the girl, likely washed away much of the decaying material, even if it replaced it with rocky sediments, which incidentally preserved the shape of the corpse. It also caked her clothes, making a lasting impression of how her garments clung to her form. Well, it was a series of startling incidences that led to the creation of the Kentucky legend. First off, the water contamination led to the transfer of the coffins. Clumsy excavators then bumped into Minnie's coffin and was shocked to find her preserved in hard rock sediment formation, because her coffin just happened to get the worst of the hard water flow. And that's is believed what led to the legend this poor girl turned to stone. A little bit of rhetorical and literal digging, though, you can come up with a rather logical conclusion as to what might actually cause this supposed mystery to take place in the first place. Well, from stone victims in Kentucky, let's go to the mystery of the Bermuda Triangle. It took place about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, December 5th, 1945. A group of 5 torpedo bombers flown by the United States Navy left Fort Lauderdale, Florida to conduct a training mission. World War II had come to a close several months before, and this was just a routine training mission. Just a part of the job of being a pilot, or at least so the young aviators that flew the planes believed. But this group of bombers, later known as the infamous Flight 19, would find that there was nothing at all routine about their flight. Shortly after they took to the air, something very strange happened. All their instruments began to fail. Compasses, air pressure gauges, and coordinates didn't make any sense. A whole panel of instruments had gone haywire, with gauges wildly swaying back and forth. This was not something these young pilots were trained to deal with. They were all World War II veterans, so they were experienced pilots. They were just not used to flying with none of their equipment working. Well, they radioed back to base. Their instrument panel was somehow awry, and they requested help. After that, radio transmissions went silent. Well, realizing the pilots are in trouble, Martin Mariner was sent to try and locate them. It was sent to the missing plane's last known coordinates, and it vanished as well. Neither the 5 lost bombers or the bombers sent to rescue the lost bombers have ever been found. No wreckage, no bodies, no nothing. This means that 6 planes and 27 men that operated them have winked out of existence without any sign that they were ever there in the first place. And since the site of the missing crew was within a section of the ocean which formed a triangle from Bermuda in the far north to Cuba in the west and Virgin Islands in the east, this whole area has been dubbed the Bermuda Triangle. Troubled waters of this region didn't first gain its stormy reputation in 1945. Long before that, boats and planes and other manner of transportation in the history of somehow disappearing when traversing through this particular sector of the Atlantic. One of the worst of these, but less well known than Flight 19, was the disappearance of the U.S. naval craft, the USS Cyclops. On board that ship was an entire crew, 309 sailors and cargo. They apparently hit some turbulent water at some point and sent out a mayday call. And shortly after that, the ship, its crew, and the entire contents it carried vanished without a trace. Several more noteworthy disappearances would occur in that ensuing year, such as a Douglas DC-3 that vanished without a trace December 28, 1948. Then there was the Connemara 4, a yacht that vanished just south of the island of Bermuda, September 26, 1955. A couple of KC-135 Stratotankers vanished on August 28, 1963. So the question becomes, what happens? How is it all these vanishing acts are occurring in this one small area of the ocean? Well, over the years, there have been a few theories that have been put forth. Maybe the most outlandish is the theory that there's some sort of portal that periodically opens up and sucks up those who happen to be nearby. Are there folks who disappear in a triangle transported to another dimension? Then there's the popular theory that maybe aliens did it. As if UFOs just happen to swoop down in a specific region and periodically pick up specimens. Then, of course, there's the theory that maybe the Earth's own magnetic field possibly being the source of the disappearances. Some have theorized that maybe the field is particularly strong or sending out unusual wavelengths that mess with the navigational instruments of the ships and planes. That's maybe probably as good as any other explanation. Still doesn't answer the question of why the wreckage from these planes and boats have never been found. The mystery of the Bermuda Triangle continues to boggle our minds to this day. Well, from the Bermuda Triangle, let's go to the country of Australia. One of the oddest true crime mysteries. A shark spits up a human arm, and a guy gets busted for murder. This incident began back in the spring of 1935. Around this time, a local fisherman by the name of Bert Hobson reeled in a catch he'd never bargained for. Pulled up a small shark with another larger shark attached to it, apparently caught in the act of snacking on a little guy. Bert Hobson quickly reeled them both up to the surface of the water with his fishing line. He was intrigued by the catch and decided to keep it. Showed it off to his brother, who just so happened to have his own aquarium over in the Sydney suburb of Coogee. The shark, which had apparently survived being towed through the waters by the fisherman's boat, was put in the aquarium. Well, it didn't live for very long, though, and after a short time began coughing up all sorts of stuff that it had eaten. Hacked up everything from birds and mice to the aforementioned smaller shark. Even more alarming, it spit up what looked like the arm of a human. Shark attacks aren't all that uncommon in Australia. Notice how the arm came out of this beast, and logically assumed this is what must have happened. Considering the arm to be perhaps the only surviving remnant of a human being, aquarium owner decided to show some respect and had the arm removed from the aquarium. Then he called the police, who were ready to conduct a thorough investigation. Well, what they found was absolutely incredible. They discovered whoever this arm belonged to was in fact not a shark attack victim, but rather a murder victim. On closer examination, it was revealed the arm was not torn off, as would have been the case with a shark attack. Actually, it appeared to have been surgically removed. In other words, the arm had been sliced off with a sharpened blade or some other type of instrument. Apparently, somebody cut off the man's arm and tossed it to the sharks. But if they did, why did they do it? Well, these are the obvious questions running through the minds of investigators as this strange mystery continued to unfold. The arm itself, despite having been consumed by a shark, was surprisingly well preserved. Well preserved enough for investigators to actually get fingerprints from the fingertips on the hand of the severed limb. And it was these fingerprints that led the police to who the arm belonged to. A man by the name of James Smith, who was owner of a pool hall and actually fairly well known in Australian authorities in that region. He was a bookie, a known con man who had been taken into custody in the past for making bad bets. Police soon tracked down Smith's next of kin, his brother Eddie. Discovered James Smith had been missing for a few weeks. Well, the arm was shown to Eddie, and due to the unique tattoos his brother had carried on his bicep, Eddie was able to confirm the disembodied arm did indeed belong to his brother James. At this point, of course, it was assumed that James was dead. It was possible he could have lost an arm and continued living, but this actually seemed highly unlikely. But if he was dead, where was the rest of him? Where was the body? After their talk with Eddie, they managed to track down James's wife, Gladys. Gladys informed them the last time she saw her husband, he had said something about going on a fishing trip with some friends. And this mention, as vague as it was, set off alarm bells in the minds of the investigators. He was going on a fishing trip on the water. Seemed never clearly on the trail of what had happened to James and what led to his arm being tossed into the deep. And after speaking with his wife, the police managed to track down the whereabouts of one of his friends, John Brady. Brady was actually wanted at that point in time for charges of forgery. Their unwilling witness was tracked down, however, and was able to provide a few pieces towards solving the puzzle. Brady actually admitted to staying for a brief time with James Smith at a cottage on the coastline right in the suburb of Coogee, with the shark and the amputated arm later discovered. Police wanted to speak with Brady further and planned to do so, but their second attempt to get an interview was thwarted when he was subsequently caught up in a fraud case and put on trial. Ultimately acquitted in this instance, and would spend the next 20 years in and out of courts and prison systems on various offenses. He perished at age 71 from a massive heart attack. All along, police have maintained the theory that Brady had something to do with the arm and the shark, but the mystery's never actually been solved. It's one of the most famous unsolved mysteries in Australia. Well, from the arm and the shark, let's go to something we've talked about once or twice in the past. The Philadelphia experiment. It's been a long-standing mystery in UFO and paranormal activity lore. According to legend, it was in the fall of 1943, during the height of World War II. U.S. military engaged in a stunning experiment in the naval shipyards of Philadelphia. Supposedly, they were trying to render a ship invisible. Not simply invisible to radar, but physically invisible to the naked eye. Well, such a thing probably sounded a lot more like science fiction a few decades ago than it does today, for it's now fairly well known that modern-day engineers are on the verge of making at least partial invisibility a reality. There are patents for invisibility cloaks that can reflect and bend light so the objects appear to be invisible. In the near future, though, further advancement just might be possible to make a boat invisible after all, simply by bending sunlight around it to reflect blue skies and water rather than the hull of the ship. And it's a neat trick and could soon be put in use in a shipyard near you. But what supposedly went down in Philadelphia in 1943 is a little more intense than that. According to the story, it wasn't a simple matter of reflecting and bending light to obscure the visibility of an object. A matter of bending physics itself, which led to the ship not only becoming invisible, but actually disappearing, or others say teleporting from one location to another. According to this mysterious tale, the ship in question, USS Eldridge, was at the shipyard in Philadelphia when massive generators were turned on, caused it to suddenly light up with an intense blue glow and then vanish. Then reported it reappeared several miles away at another shipyard much further down the coast in Norfolk, Virginia. And then it vanished from there and reappeared in Philadelphia. But this time, the crew was most definitely the worse for the wear. It said that several had severe burns, many more were nauseated, and a few had been turned entirely insane. Further investigation revealed that there was an even worse fate for a handful of the sailors who were on board the Eldridge that day. It was discovered it somehow physically fused with the hull of the ship, as if their bodies had become molecularly undone during the teleportation phase. And then when their molecules came back together, they'd done so halfway submerged in the structure of the ship itself. It said that a handful also didn't materialize back at all. There'd be a movie made in the 1980s based on this legendary story, and it would star a couple of characters who were supposed to be among the sailors who were teleported elsewhere. According to the film, they teleported not just to another place, but also to another time. One second they're standing on the deck of the ship in 1943, and the next thing they knew, they were walking around over 40 years later, in 1984. The movie depicting these events was a work of fiction, but conspiracy theorist Al Bielek later claimed he was one of the sailors propelled into the future, and the movie was what actually triggered the memory so he could remember what happened to him. And it's pretty far out stuff, of course, and Bielek certainly has his critics, but the story didn't begin with Bielek. It actually began when UFO researcher Morris K. Jessup blew the whistle on the story back in the 1950s. Jessup was contacted by a man named Carlos Allende, who first told him the details of this strange incident. Allende stated that although he wasn't on board the Eldridge, he was on the deck of a nearby ship, the SS Andrew Ferusith, and able to bear witness to what happened. He also spoke with some of the survivors, and according to Allende, the fact that the experiment had succeeded, at least succeeded in the sense that something spectacular happened, was evidence that Albert Einstein's unified fields theory was correct. Jessup didn't immediately believe this tall tale, but filed the letter away and took a mental note. Jessup, in the meantime, had been researching UFOs and become something of an expert on hypothetical theories as to how these strange craft might fly and function. Wrote a very well-received book on the subject called The Case for the UFO. And his book got the attention of the Office of Naval Research, and they contacted him and mentioned they'd received and reviewed the book. They actually returned to Jessup an annotated version with all kinds of strange notes written in the margins. The notes commented, in many instances corrected Jessup's theories in a manner that presented itself far in advance of any known earthly science at the time. They also made several references to the Philadelphia experiment. Jessup was under the impression some of the critiques just might have been made by the mysterious Carlos Allende himself. And as exciting as this all might seem, these clues ultimately led him to absolutely nowhere, and unfortunately Jessup said to have taken his own life April 20th, 1959. And the reason for his suicide is typically given as simply being due to depression over failed book publications and disillusionment with life in general. supposedly left a note that spoke of his determination that another existence of the universe would be better than this miserable world. And there are those, of course, who've always argued that Jessup didn't commit suicide at all. They contend he was murdered, precisely because he was being a bit too close to unraveling the mystery. Whatever the truth might be, the strange saga of the Philadelphia experiment continues to raise more than a few eyebrows. Well, there's a lot of theories out there, a lot of conspiracy theories. We're going to be talking about a good many of them in future shows. But for now, we come to the end of today's show. We've run out of time. So until tomorrow at this time, this is Ken Hudnall for the Ken Hudnall Show saying have a truly great evening.